All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into the absolute bloodbath that is the 1981 cult classic The Evil Dead. Directed by Sam Raimi and fueled by a famously, totally grueling production, this indie film completely revolutionized horror. So, let's break down the exact plot mechanics of this relentless masterpiece.
Before we even step foot in the cabin, you really got to realize Stephen King's massive influence here. His rave review at the 1982 Cannes Film Festival was absolutely instrumental in launching this gruesome little independent movie into cinematic legend. It caught the attention of major distributors like New Line Cinema, so you have to wonder what exactly was on that screen that caused such a visceral reaction.
Well, the nightmare starts with a completely classic setup. 5 Michigan State University students arrive for vacation at this eerie, super remote cabin in the rural hills of Tennessee. And the atmosphere is just instantly unsettling. Like, right as they walk up, a porch swing starts moving entirely on its own, and it only stops when someone grabs the cabin door key. Super creepy, right?
So, looking at our core group here, these doomed friends are just normal college kids expecting a relaxing getaway. We've got our soon-to-be iconic hero Ash Williams, his girlfriend Linda, his sister Cheryl, his confident buddy Scott, and Scott's girlfriend Shelley. But man, the cabin definitely has other plans for them.
The horror actually kicks off pretty quietly with Ash's sister, Cheryl. She's sketching this old clock, and suddenly the ticking just stops. Out of nowhere, this faint, supernatural voice whispers, "Join us." In a really chilling sequence, her hand is violently forced to draw a distorted, monstrous face on the cover of a book. And though she's deeply shaken, she actually keeps this terrifying incident to herself. Classic mistake.
The terror really breaches the surface during dinner. Out of absolutely nowhere, the cellar trap door violently flies open on its own. Ash and Scott head down into the dark to check it out, and they stumble upon the exact thing Cheryl drew, the sinister Natarum Demonto. It's basically a Sumerian version of the Book of the Dead, and it's just sitting there next to an old archaeologist's tape recorder.
Now, against literally all common sense, Scott decides to hit play on that tape recording. Through the speakers, this voice recites ancient incantations that actively resurrect a dark entity known as the Kandarian demon, and the recording lays out a super grim rule for survival for the rest of the night. The only possible way to kill the demonic entity is to completely dismember the possessed host.
The fallout from waking the demon is immediate. An agitated Cheryl heads out into the dark woods to investigate some strange noises, and she is just violently assaulted by demonically possessed trees. She barely manages to escape back to the cabin, totally battered and terrified. Ash agrees to drive her back to town, but when they reach the road, they discover the only bridge back to civilization is completely destroyed. The woods have literally come alive, and they are hopelessly trapped.
You know, what's wild is how this fictional isolation perfectly mirrored the real-life grueling production of the film. The cast and crew endured agonizing conditions just to survive the shoot in an actual remote cabin in Morristown, Tennessee. With zero plumbing and freezing temperatures, people were constantly sick. By the end of the shoot, they literally had to burn the set's furniture just to stay warm. Insane, right?
Back inside the cabin, the supernatural terror fully takes hold. Linda and Shelley are playing a simple game of spades, and Cheryl, who is sitting over by the window, just casually calls out the suits without even looking at them. Suddenly, she goes full white-eyed monster and starts levitating. She threatens to kill everyone in this raspy voice, stabs Linda in the ankle with a pencil, and launches Ash into a shelf before Scott finally manages to knock her into the cellar and lock the door.
Let me tell you about those terrifying white demonic eyes during these possession scenes. To pull that off, the actors endured torturous, incredibly thick glass contact lenses. Bruce Campbell even described it as feeling like putting Tupperware over their eyes. Because the eyes couldn't breathe, they could only withstand them for like 15 minutes at a time. The removal process was so rough, it actually ripped off actress Betsy Baker's eyelashes. Ouch.
From there, the demonic possessions just start cascading rapidly. Shelley is understandably terrified by Cheryl's transformation, so she retreats to her room. But she's drawn to the window, where the Kandarian demon crashes through and claims her too. She violently attacks Scott, forcing him to push his own girlfriend into the fireplace, stab her in the back with a Sumerian dagger, and finally, gruesomely dismember her with an axe when she reanimates. And the horror escalation just continues. A shaken Scott leaves the cabin to try and find a way out, but returns shortly after, mortally wounded by the possessed trees out in the woods. He literally dies, warning Ash that the trees will absolutely not allow them to escape. Leaving Scott's body, Ash goes to check on Linda, only to realize a truly devastating truth. His own girlfriend has now become possessed.
Ash is now faced with an impossible choice. Linda attacks him, but he just can't bring himself to dismember the woman he loves, so he buries her instead. But of course, the demon doesn't rest. Linda revives right out of the grave, forcing a completely exhausted Ash to do the unthinkable and decapitate the reviving body of his girlfriend with a shovel.
By this point in the film, Ash is completely covered in gore. And honestly, that was an absolute nightmare for actor Bruce Campbell. The production created gallons of fake blood using Caro corn syrup, food coloring, and coffee. This viscous, sticky fluid was practically impossible to wash off, and because the cabin was unheated, the syrup literally froze onto the actor's skin for hours on end. So, heading into the blood-soaked climax, the situation is incredibly dire. Ash is entirely alone, trapped inside a barricaded cabin with the reanimated monstrous bodies of his closest friends and his sister actively trying to kill him. Surrounded by demonic forces and exhausted beyond belief, you have to wonder, how can one man possibly make it out alive? Ash's frantic final actions are a masterclass in escalating, chaotic suspense. First, Scott's dead body reanimates into a monster. As Scott attacks, Ash gouges his eyes out and literally pulls a tree branch right from his stomach. Then, suddenly, Cheryl breaks through the cellar door and knocks Ash to the floor. While being attacked by both Scott and Cheryl simultaneously, Ash desperately spots the Nadarum Damanto and hurls the Sumerian book straight into the burning fireplace.
And that desperate gamble actually pays off. As the cursed book burns in the flames, it severs the demon's hold. The horrific ordeal finally comes to an end as the remaining possessed bodies of Scott and Cheryl freeze in place. They rapidly start decomposing and bursting into these monstrous appendages before showering Ash in a final deluge of blood. Against all odds, Ash is the sole survivor.
As dawn finally breaks, an exhausted, blood-soaked Ash stumbles outside into the daylight. But the nightmare isn't over. In the film's iconic, totally ambiguous final shot, the unseen Kandarian demon races relentlessly through the forest, rushing straight at a screaming Ash. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this final thought. If you were placed in Ash's shoes with the Book of the Dead, would your survival strategy have worked, or would you have joined them?